Chapter 1. Captain Rhea Valen stood before the UEC Council, the massive room echoing with the murmurs of Earth's top officials. Above her, holograms flickered, displaying the latest intelligence reports. Vra'ax warships closing in on human colonies, their superior firepower overwhelming. On the screen, the once bustling station of Goliath had been reduced to rubble, its last transmission an agonizing scream that cut off mid-sentence. Rhea's eyes narrowed. The room fell silent as she stepped forward, the weight of countless lives pressing down on her shoulders. Earth was on the brink of annihilation, and the politicians still bickered about diplomacy. "We can't negotiate with them," Rhea said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "The Vra'ax don't care for peace. They want our extinction." General Henson, his gray hair stiff with age, leaned forward in his chair. "You're proposing war, Captain, against a species that has wiped out entire civilizations? We can't match their strength." Rhea's gaze flickered to the hollow of the Goliath, its twisted metal frame reflecting the devastation. Her pulse quickened. She could almost hear the screams, the chaos. "We have no choice. If we don't fight back now, we will cease to exist. The Vra'ax are coming for us, and they're not stopping until we're gone." A murmur ran through the council, but it was Senator Lisa Carson who spoke next, her voice laced with doubt. "Your confidence is admirable, Captain, but you forget, the Vra'ax have technology centuries ahead of ours. How do you plan to fight an enemy we can't even comprehend?" Rhea swallowed, her mind racing. She couldn't let the doubt infect her. "We fight with everything we have," she said, the words firm. "Our strength isn't in our weapons. It's in our resolve. We are human. We adapt. We survive." Lisa's gaze hardened. "You're suggesting we throw away the last of our resources for a fight we can't win? What are we supposed to do, Captain? Launch a fleet of ragtag ships against their armada?" A cold smile tugged at Rhea's lips. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting. We may not have their technology, but we have the will to fight. We know how to survive when the odds are stacked against us." There was a brief silence before Admiral Ross spoke up, his voice gruff. "The UEC is fractured. Some colonies have already surrendered or agreed to terms with the Vra'ax. They see no future in resisting." He glanced at Rhea. "And they may be right. Then it's up to us to prove them wrong," she shot back. "Humanity has survived worse. We've overcome the impossible before, and we will do it again. We may be outnumbered, but we are not weak. We are not a species that falls easily." The council members exchanged uncertain looks. Some faces were weary, others fearful, but none seemed willing to dismiss Rhea's words outright. The Vra'ax were a nightmare made flesh, and every day their ships drew closer. The room was thick with hesitation, but Rhea knew one thing with unshakable certainty. If they didn't act now, humanity's future would be decided for them. She stepped forward, her voice low but unyielding. "The first step is assembling a force. Not just a military, but a resistance. We need every colony, every ship, every fighter willing to stand and fight. We will hit them where it hurts, disrupt their supply lines, sabotage their technology, force them into a war they can't win." General Henson raised a hand. "You're talking about guerrilla warfare, Captain. That's not a strategy. It's a death sentence." "It's our only chance," Rhea replied. "If we can't win with firepower, we win with ingenuity. We strike fast, hit hard, and force them to bleed." A tense silence hung in the air as Rhea locked eyes with each member of the council. The weight of her words settled in, leaving a lingering sense of unease. "I'll lead this resistance," she said, her voice resolute. "If we fall fighting." The room exploded into chaos. Some members shouted objections. Others began arguing over resources and logistics, while others simply stared at the floor, overwhelmed by the enormity of the decision. In the midst of it all, Rhea stood unwavering, her eyes fixed on the task ahead. The fear of the unknown had no place here. The fear of losing had no place here. Senator Carson's voice finally cut through the noise. "What do you need from us, Captain?" Rhea turned to face her, her expression hardening. "I need everything. Ships, soldiers, engineers. every person willing to fight. And I need your support, because if you don't stand with me, you stand with the Vra'ax. And there will be no turning back. Carson hesitated, then nodded. You have my support, Captain, but the cost will be immense. Rhea held her gaze steady. The cost of inaction is greater. We can't afford to wait for the Vra'ax to take Earth. We strike first. The council went quiet, a finality settling in. Rhea's heart beat louder in her chest, but she could feel the shift in the room, an understanding that her words were not just rallying cries, but a necessary call to arms. She turned to leave, her mind already running through the details. Every step from here on out would be a fight for survival. As she crossed the threshold, General Henson's voice stopped her. Captain, you're not wrong, but you're walking into a storm. I just hope your resolve is strong enough to weather it. Rhea paused, her back to him. We'll see. Humanity's resolve has always been its greatest weapon. And with that, she left the council chamber, her mind focused on the task ahead. A fight for humanity's future had begun. Chapter 2. Captain Rhea Valen sat in the dim light of the command center aboard the Defiant, her fingers drumming impatiently on the console. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound breaking the stillness, and the tension was palpable. They were about to enter uncharted space, and with it, the very future of humanity. The mission was clear: unite the scattered human colonies and form an unbreakable resistance against the Vra'ax. But as she gazed at the holographic map before her, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time. We're coming up on Krallen 7, Captain. Lieutenant Martell's voice broke her thoughts, a touch of urgency in his tone. He was the closest thing she had to a right hand. His calm demeanor had kept her grounded more than once, but even he seemed uneasy. Rhea straightened, her eyes meeting his. Krallen 7, she repeated, almost to herself. It was one of the larger colonies still holding out, but barely. The Vra'ax had already made their presence known. Skirmishes with the local defense forces were becoming more frequent, and every day that passed, their resolve to resist grew weaker. Prepare for a rough reception, Martell added, his fingers moving across the controls. There's talk of negotiations. Some of them want to surrender. Not on my watch, Rhea muttered, her jaw tightening. We don't negotiate with them. The Defiant came out of hyperspace, and Krallen 7 loomed large before them. A battered planet, scarred by conflict but still alive. Rhea felt a deep pang of responsibility. This colony, like so many others, had suffered too long. It had already been weakened by fear, political division, and the unrelenting attacks from the Vra'ax. The time for diplomacy was over. They needed a leader, not a negotiator. We're entering the atmosphere, Martell called, snapping her from her thoughts. As they descended through the thick clouds, Rhea's gaze fixed on the ground below. The once thriving cities of Krallen 7 were now little more than ruins, the scars of war etched into every building, every street. This was the face of humanity's fight for survival. The Defiant touched down with a soft jolt. The airlock opened, and Rhea stepped out onto the cracked earth. The colony's leaders were waiting for her, their faces a mix of hope and uncertainty. Colonel Durand, the commander of the Krallen 7 Defense Force, was the first to approach. Captain Valen, he said, his voice weary but respectful. We've heard the rumors. You're here to rally us for a fight we can't win. Rhea met his gaze, unflinching. I'm here because you haven't lost yet, but you'll if you surrender. The Vra'ax will show no mercy. Durand looked over his shoulder at the other leaders. Men and women who had once been civilians, now thrust into the brutal realities of war. We've fought for months, Captain. Our people are exhausted, outnumbered, and outgunned. There's nothing left to fight with. Then we'll give you something to fight with, Rhea said, her tone resolute. You've been on the defensive. It's time to take the fight to them. Guerrilla warfare, sabotage, hit-and-run tactics. We'll hit their supply lines, disrupt their command centers. We'll make them bleed. Durand's expression was a mixture of skepticism and desperation. And what happens when they retaliate? They'll wipe us out in an instant. Then we make sure they don't get the chance, Rhea replied. We strike first. We make them fear us. Lieutenant Martell stepped forward, adding, "We've got new weapons and tactics that'll give us an edge. But we need your full cooperation. The colonies must unite. If we fail here, the Vra'ax will move on to the next target, and the next, until there's no one left." There was a long silence. Rhea could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear that had gripped her when she first realized the full scope of the war. But there was something else there, too, a flicker of hope. Colonel Duran nodded, his face hardening. "All right, Captain, we're in. But this isn't going to be easy. Our people are tired. I'll need to convince them." Rhea's gaze softened. "You won't have to convince them. We all know what's at stake. I just need you to lead them." As they began to make preparations, Rhea found herself walking through the remnants of the colony's once bustling city. The streets were empty, the buildings hollowed out by years of conflict. But she noticed something. Amid the destruction, the people were still here. They hadn't left, and they were waiting for something, anything, to give them hope again. As Rhea passed through the ruins, a group of civilians emerged from the shadows. One of them, a woman with dirt-streaked hair, stepped forward. Her eyes were tired but defiant. "You're here to fight," the woman said. "But can you win?" Rhea paused, meeting the woman's gaze. "We can win because we're human. We don't give up. Not when the odds are stacked against us. We find a way to survive." The woman's lips quivered, and for a moment, Rhea thought she might break. But then, the woman straightened, as if drawing strength from Rhea's words. "You'll have our support," the woman said, her voice steady. "We've lost everything, but we're not losing our future." Rhea nodded, grateful for her resolve. "Then let's make sure we don't lose it." Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ruined city, Rhea stood on the balcony of the colony's command center. She watched as the workers, the soldiers, and the civilians began to prepare for the Resistance's first strike. It wasn't much: small arms, explosives, and a few ships that barely worked, but it was a start. They would make the Vra'ax feel the cost of their invasion. Martell joined her, standing silently for a moment before speaking. "We got a lot of work to do, Captain." Rhea turned to him, her expression hardening. "We've got a war to win, Lieutenant. Let's get started." The night was thick with the sounds of preparation, shouts, the clank of metal, the whir of machinery coming back to life. The Resistance was beginning to take shape, and Rhea, despite the fear and doubt that still gnawed at her, felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For the first time since the Vra'ax had come, she believed humanity had a chance. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Chapter 3, The Defiant, was on high alert as it drifted silently through the dark, star-speckled expanse of space. Rhea stood on the command deck, her gaze fixed on the holographic projection of the Vra'ax fleet. The sensors had picked up their movement, an armada of warships, massive and unrelenting, advancing toward Kralin 7. The Vra'ax were not wasting any time. The attack on the colony was inevitable. "We've got a fleet coming in hot." Lieutenant Martell's voice snapped her from her thoughts. 5 battleships, 30 cruisers, and numerous destroyers. Vra'ax signature. "We need to move now." Rhea's fingers flew over the console. The Defiant had been a symbol of humanity's resistance, but against this kind of overwhelming firepower, it was a speck of dust. She clenched her jaw, knowing full well that survival now depended on quick, precise actions. A retreat was not an option. Not now. Not when so many had already given everything just to stand and fight. "Status of the colonies?" she asked, her tone even, though her mind raced. She couldn't afford to show fear. Not now. Not when the stakes were higher than ever. "Colony defenses are up, but they won't last long," Martell replied, his voice taut with frustration. "They've been outmanned, outgunned for too long. If we don't act fast, we'll lose everything." Rhea's mind raced as the harsh reality of their situation settled in. The Vra'ax were masters of war, their technology superior in every way. Humanity's only advantage was their ability to adapt, to innovate under pressure. The Resistance had managed to sabotage a few smaller Vra'ax vessels and skirmishes, but nothing on this scale. Nothing that could turn the tide. "Prepare the fleet for a counterattack," Rhea ordered, her voice commanding. "We're not running. We hit them where it hurts. Make them regret ever stepping foot in our space." As Martel relayed the orders, Rhea's thoughts turned to Commander Zorkoth, the leader of the Vra'ax. She had studied him in every briefing, every intercepted transmission. He was ruthless, cold, calculating. His belief in Vra'ax superiority was absolute. To him, humanity was little more than an obstacle to be crushed. She could almost hear his voice in her mind, taunting her. "Asterisk, you are weak. You are nothing." Asterisk, he'd said in their last broadcast, his arrogance evident in every word. It was clear that he considered their efforts futile. He underestimated humanity. He always had. And that, Rhea knew, was his mistake. Incoming transmission. Martel's voice interrupted her thoughts. Rhea's stomach tightened. She knew exactly what it was. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, and there he was, Zorkoth, his reptilian features twisted into a sneer. Behind him, the vastness of the Vra'ax warship loomed, its cold metallic surface reflecting the emptiness of space. His eyes locked onto Rhea's. "Captain Valen," Zorkoth's voice echoed through the room, a low, menacing growl. "You persist in this foolishness, even after all the damage you've caused. You humans never learn." Rhea stood tall, her expression unwavering. "You underestimated us once, Zorkoth. Don't make the same mistake twice." Zorkoth's lips curled into a smile, though it was devoid of humor. "You still think you have a chance? How quaint. You have no hope. Your colonies will burn, and you will beg for mercy. There is no future for you, only the inevitable end." Rhea's fingers tightened into fists at her sides. His words were meant to break her resolve, to instill fear. But they only fueled her determination. "Your arrogance will be your downfall," Rhea said coldly. "We'll make you regret underestimating humanity." Zorkoth's gaze sharpened, his expression hardening. "We shall see. The destruction of your pathetic species is a matter of time. I will be the one to end it." With a dismissive wave, Zorkoth cut the transmission, leaving Rhea staring at the black screen. His words were chilling, but they didn't shake her. She was ready for this. Humanity was ready. They had to be. "Status update," she ordered, turning back to the command deck. "Enemy fleet is on approach," Martel reported, his voice tight. "They'll be in range in under an hour. We're still outmatched, but we've got a few surprises of our own." Rhea nodded. "No matter how powerful they are, we have something they don't. The will to fight. Prepare the resistance fleet for immediate engagement. We'll hit them with everything we've got." The battle began with a deafening roar of weapons fire as the Vra'ax fleet entered range. The human ships, though outnumbered and technologically inferior, launched their counterattack with the ferocity of cornered animals. The Defiant darted through the chaos, weaving between massive warships, its weapons firing in quick bursts, striking Vra'ax cruisers. Every shot was a gamble, every move a risk. The odds were impossible, but Rhea couldn't afford hesitation. "Shields holding at 40%, Martel reported. "We're taking hits from their cruisers, targeting our engines. Focus fire on their destroyers," Rhea ordered, her voice unshaken. "We can't win a head-on fight. We need to cripple their command structure." As the resistance fleet moved in formation, small but fierce, Rhea's mind sharpened. Every moment counted. The human ships were agile, hitting hard and fast, slipping past the heavier Vra'ax ships and striking at weak points. The Vra'ax, with all their strength, still underestimated humanity's ability to think on their feet. But even as they struck back, the Vra'ax retaliation was swift. Massive energy blasts slammed into the human ships, sending several of them spiraling into destruction. Rhea watched in silence as one of her own cruisers, the Vigilant, exploded in a burst of light, its last transmission a cry for help. The loss was a painful reminder of the stakes, but there was no time for grief. The fight raged on. "We've got a breach in our hull," Martel shouted, his eyes scanning the readings. "It's getting worse. Captain, we need to fall back." Rhea's hand gripped the command console, her knuckles white. "No, we can't retreat. Not now." She looked out at the destruction unfolding before her. Human ships, small and nimble, fighting against an overwhelming enemy. They were being pushed to their limits, but they were still standing. They were still alive. Target their weak points, Rhea commanded. We can win this. We will win this. The Defiant fired again, and this time, their aim was true. A Vra'ax cruiser, unable to evade, took a direct hit to its engines. The explosion lit up the void of space, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. The Resistance had scored a victory, small but significant. Rhea's pulse raced, but there was no time to savor the moment. Move in. Keep pushing. They can't take much more of this. Her voice rang with authority, and for a fleeting moment, the crew of the Defiant responded with renewed vigor. The battle was far from over, but the first cracks in the Vra'ax's might had appeared. And for the first time, Rhea allowed herself a flicker of hope. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. And they would. Chapter for the Defiant hung in the void, its hull scarred from the battle, the hum of its engines barely audible over the storm of emotions that coursed through Rhea. The Vra'ax were relentless. Their fleet had sustained damage, but they were regrouping, preparing for a final strike that would wipe out humanity's remaining resistance. This was it, the last stand. There would be no retreat. There would be no second chances. Rhea stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Vra'ax flagship, the Exalted Blade. It loomed large and menacing on the screen, a fortress of dark metal surrounded by smaller ships, like wolves circling their prey. The Vra'ax had planned their next move with ruthless precision. The flagship was the heart of their operation. Destroying it would cripple their entire fleet, buy humanity some time, and just maybe change the course of the war. Captain, Martell's voice broke through her thoughts. We've got one shot at this. If we go in too deep, we'll be torn apart before we can even get close. Their shields are impenetrable. Rhea didn't take her eyes off the screen. We won't get close. We'll hit them from the inside. Martell glanced at her, his expression wary. Are you sure about this? We don't have a manpower for a full assault on the flagship, and the Vra'ax will see us coming. I'm sure, Rhea said, her voice unwavering. We've got the element of surprise. It's a calculated risk, but it's the only option we've got. She turned toward the rest of the bridge crew. Prepare the boarding teams. We're infiltrating the Exalted Blade. The silence that followed was thick with uncertainty. The plan was madness. Infiltrating a Vra'ax flagship, a heavily fortified and well-guarded ship, was suicide. But Rhea knew that desperate times required desperate measures. They had already sacrificed so much. They couldn't afford to back down now. Lieutenant Ivan Martell stepped forward. We'll need a diversion to draw their attention. It won't be easy. Rhea nodded. Agreed. We'll launch a full-scale attack from the outer rim. Create enough noise to keep them occupied while our strike team breaches the flagship. Martell's eyes narrowed. And if they notice the distraction, then we do what we've been doing all along, Rhea said, a determined edge to her voice. We fight to survive. The Defiant broke off into a wide formation, sending out a dozen smaller ships to engage the Vra'ax fleet. The chaos of the battle erupted instantly. Blasts of energy lit up the dark expanse of space as the human ships launched their weapons, darting in and out of the shadows of larger Vra'ax vessels. The Exalted Blade responded immediately, its firepower overwhelming the human fleet. Several ships exploded in flashes of light as Rhea watched, her stomach churning. The price of this gamble was steep, but they had no other choice. Let's go, Rhea said, her words short and decisive. Strike team, move out. A group of elite soldiers, handpicked for this mission, was waiting for her in the airlock. They stood in silence, fully suited up in black tactical gear. The air was thick with anticipation. Rhea's own heart beat faster as the door slid open, revealing the cold darkness of space. They were about to board the flagship, without backup, without certainty of survival. She turned to her team. We make our way to their command center. We disrupt their communications, then plant the charges. We don't engage unless necessary. The team nodded, their faces set with grim resolve. They were all volunteers, soldiers who had given everything for the cause. There were no guarantees here. Rhea met their eyes, silently thanking them for their willingness to sacrifice. They activated their thrusters and shot forward, propelled by the force of their suits, toward the belly of the exalted blade. Their approach was silent, swift. Rhea kept her eyes locked on the massive vessel as it loomed ever closer. Her mind was a whirlwind of strategy, of calculations, but beneath it all, there was the gnawing question of what would happen if they failed. Their bodies slammed into the surface of the exalted blade with a force that rattled her teeth, but the magnetic boots on their suits held firm. Rhea led the way, her pulse steady, her mind focused. Breaching now, she whispered into her communicator, signaling the team to follow her. A low hiss signaled the opening of the airlock. The thick metallic door slid aside, and they entered, weapons raised. The inside of the flagship was cold, sterile, and hauntingly quiet. The walls were lined with sleek alien technology, the faint hum of machinery filling the air. Rhea led the way through the narrow corridors, their boots echoing against the floor. They moved quickly, efficiently, avoiding the main halls to stay out of sight. As they neared the command center, Rhea signaled for the team to stop. She motioned to the door, indicating the enemy presence beyond it. Through the slit in the door, she could see Vra'ax officers moving about, their alien eyes scanning the monitors. Their voices, deep and guttural, reverberated through the walls. "On my mark," Rhea said, her voice steady. "We take them out fast, plant the charges, and get the hell out." She tapped her wrist communicator, syncing their movements. The seconds ticked by like hours as the tension grew thicker. Now Rhea ordered. The team burst through the door, weapons firing. The Vra'ax officers didn't have time to react. The soldiers moved with lethal precision, taking down the alien forces in a flurry of gunfire. Rhea's heart pounded, but her focus remained sharp. They planted the explosives, small, but powerful enough to send the flagship into disarray. "Charges set," Rhea said, breathing heavily. "Time to get out of here." But as she turned to leave, an alarm blared, loud and shrill. The Vra'ax had detected the breach. The hallway outside was now filled with enemy soldiers. "Move!" Rhea shouted. They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of their boots pounding against the floor blending with the shrill alarm. The Vra'ax soldiers pursued, firing blasts that narrowly missed Rhea's team. The exit was in sight, just a few more meters. "Almost there," Martel called out from behind her. They reached the airlock just as the first wave of Vra'ax soldiers rounded the corner. The team dove into the lock, slamming the door shut behind them. Rhea quickly initiated the countdown to launch. The exalted blade shuddered violently as the charges went off, sending shockwaves through the flagship. For a moment, it felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. Then, the ship exploded in a dazzling display of light. The Defiant and the remaining fleet pulled back as the Vra'ax flagship tore apart, its guttural growls replaced by the crackling silence of space. Rhea exhaled, feeling the weight of the battle fall from her shoulders. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The Vra'ax would retaliate, but humanity had proven something today. They weren't finished. They never would be. As the Defiant turned to face the remaining enemy ships, Rhea looked out at the stars ahead, her resolve stronger than ever. This fight was far from over. But today, they had made the impossible possible. Chapter 5: The battle was over. At least, the immediate threat had passed. The Defiant hung in the vacuum of space, its systems flickering, its crew weary but alive. Rhea Valen stood on the command deck, her eyes focused on the remains of the exalted blade. The Vra'ax flagship had been obliterated, but the victory had come at a cost. Many ships had been lost, and the death toll among the resistance forces was high. But in the vastness of space, there was no room for mourning. Not yet. "We've done it, Captain," Martel said, his voice quieter than usual, as though the enormity of the victory hadn't fully settled in. His face, normally unflappable, was etched with exhaustion. He glanced at the tactical readouts, his brow furrowing. "But we're not out of the woods. The Vra'ax will retaliate. This isn't over." Rhea didn't take her eyes off the wreckage of the flagship. It had been a direct strike, a blow to the heart of the Vra'ax war effort, but the damage they'd caused was only part of the equation. The Vra'ax were relentless. Rhea knew they would regroup, adapt, and come back stronger. But now, humanity had something they hadn't had before. Hope. "We've bought ourselves some time," Rhea said, her voice hard and unwavering. "But you're right. The Vra'ax won't let this go. We need to plan our next move." A sharp tone cut through the silence. A communication request had come in from Earth. "Put it through," Rhea said, her stomach tightening. She had been expecting this. Earth's leaders had been waiting to see the results of the Exalted Blade mission. They had to know whether their gamble had paid off. The holographic image of Admiral Ross appeared in front of her. His tired eyes studied her face before speaking, his voice strained. "Captain Valen, you've done the impossible. The Exalted Blade is gone, and with it, a major portion of their command structure. The Vra'ax fleet has been significantly weakened." Rhea nodded. "We've made a dent, but it's not enough. We need to prepare for the Vra'ax's next move." Ross's holographic face tightened. "That's the problem. The Vra'ax are regrouping. They're sending reinforcements from their homeworld. Earth is safe for now, but we just put ourselves in their crosshairs. Then we'll hit them first," Rhea said, the words coming easily now. There was no room for hesitation. She had led her people through the worst, and they had won against the odds. Now, they would finish what they had started. "I agree, Captain," Ross said after a pause. "But you've got to make this call. We can't keep throwing everything we have at them. We need a strategy to cripple them for good." Rhea looked out at the stars. The vast expanse of space stretched before her, filled with possibilities and dangers alike. The Vra'ax had shown they could be defeated, but now humanity had to decide what kind of future it wanted to build. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for a future. "We strike at their homeworld," Rhea said, her voice steady. "We make them fear us. No more waiting, no more playing defense. We take the fight to them." Martel stepped forward, his expression serious. "You're talking about a full-scale assault on their homeworld. This could be the final push, but it could also be a disaster. If we fail, Earth and every human colony will be exposed." "I'm aware of the risks," Rhea replied. "But we can't keep hiding. The Vra'ax won't stop until we're wiped out. We either end this now, or we die fighting." There was silence for a moment. Ross's face flickered, his brow furrowed, but then he gave a small nod. "Understood, Captain. We'll support you. I'll send you everything we have: ships, weapons, reinforcements. You'll have what you need." "Good," Rhea said, her voice hardening with determination. "Let's make sure we do this right." The planning was swift, but the execution would require every ounce of humanity's strength. The Defiant and its fleet would lead the charge, but they wouldn't be alone. Colonies that had once been fractured, hesitant to commit to war, now stood united under one banner. The people who had once feared the Vra'ax had been inspired by their victories, their unyielding resolve. For the first time, Rhea allowed herself a moment to breathe. She walked through the halls of the Defiant, past the soldiers preparing for the final assault. The mood was different now. There was a sense of purpose, of clarity. They had been beaten down, but they had not broken. They were no longer just a resistance. They were a force. Rhea entered the briefing room, where her team had already gathered. Martel stood at the head of the table, pointing to the holographic map of the Vra'ax homeworld. The plan was laid out before them, but it was clear the risks were astronomical. "We've been given the green light," Rhea said, addressing the room. "This is it, the final assault. We hit them at their heart, cut off their command, and cripple their war machine for good." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. "This will be the hardest fight we've faced, but we've already proven we can win against impossible odds. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for our future." Martel nodded, his expression steely. "We'll make it happen, Captain. We're with you all the way." The others in the room agreed with grim nods, their faces reflecting the same determination. There was no turning back now. The battle for the Vra'ax homeworld began in the dead of night, the stars a silent witness to the chaos unfolding. Humanity's forces surged toward the heart of enemy space, their ships sleek and determined, cutting through the void with purpose. The Defiant led the charge, a symbol of humanity's defiance, its weapons locked and ready for the final strike. Rhea stood on the bridge, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. The fleet was moving into position, ready for the assault. She could feel the weight of the moment, the culmination of everything they had fought for. The Vra'ax would no longer be the hunters. They would be the hunted. "All ships are in position," Martel said, his voice taut with anticipation. "Ready when you are, Captain." Rhea looked out at the distant planet, her heart pounding in her chest. It was time. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice calm, but her resolve ironclad. The first shots rang out, and the battle for the future of humanity began. The Vra'ax would learn, as they had learned before, that humanity was not so easily defeated. They had underestimated them once, and that mistake would cost them everything. As the final blows were struck, as the Vra'ax fleet crumbled under the weight of humanity's resolve, Rhea stood alone on the command deck, watching the stars. Earth was safe. Humanity had not just survived, they had emerged victorious. The war was over, and with it, the future was theirs.